The sterile white walls of a hospital are meant to be a place of healing, of new beginnings. But for one woman, 8 months pregnant and filled with hope, they became the backdrop to a nightmare. She was there for a routine checkup, a final look at the tiny life growing inside her. As she waited for her husband in the bustling cafeteria, the sound of his familiar, hearty laugh reached her ears. But he wasn't alone, and the words that followed his laughter were a venom that seeped into her soul, shattering her world more completely than any medical diagnosis ever could. This is the story of how a single overheard conversation ignited a fire of vengeance, exposing a web of lies so deep no one would escape the flames. The air in the St. Michael's Hospital cafeteria was thick with the scent of lukewarm coffee and antiseptic. It was a symphony of muffled conversations, the clatter of plastic trays, and the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the mundane soundtrack of anxiety and relief. Olivia Hayes sat at a small table near the ficus tree in the corner, one hand resting protectively on the taut drum of her stomach. At 34 weeks, every movement of the baby inside her was a miracle, a tiny, fluttering reassurance that everything was going to be okay. Her checkup with Dr. Albright had been perfect. Strong heartbeat, ideal positioning. A textbook pregnancy from here on out, Olivia, the doctor, had said with a warm smile. Just try to relax and keep your stress levels down. Relax. It was all she wanted to do. She'd been waiting for her husband, Alistair Sterling, for 20 minutes. He was supposed to meet her here after the appointment, a rare weekday gesture he'd insisted upon. A celebratory lunch, he'd called it. Alistair was a man who dealt in grand gestures. The penthouse apartment overlooking the city, the surprise trips to Paris, the custom-designed nursery waiting for their son Mason. Alistair Sterling, the charismatic real estate magnate who had built an empire from the ground up, knew how to create a perfect picture. Olivia, an architect by trade, before her high-risk status put her on mandatory bed rest, had once loved being the centerpiece of that picture. A wave of nausea, more from hunger than morning sickness, washed over her. She decided to get a bottle of water while she waited. As she pushed her chair back, the distinct sound of Alistair's laugh, a deep, booming sound that could fill any room, cut through the cafeteria's din. A smile touched her lips. He was here. She turned, expecting to see him striding towards her, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile disarming. Instead, she saw him at a table across the room, partially obscured by a pillar. He wasn't alone. He was leaning in close to a woman, a striking redhead, in a sharp crimson dress that seemed far too glamorous for a hospital cafeteria. Olivia recognized her instantly. Scarlett Davenport, a junior analyst from Alistair's firm. He'd mentioned her a few times, praising her ruthless ambition. Olivia froze her hand still on the back of her chair. They looked so comfortable, so intimate. Scarlett laughed, a high, tinkling sound, and playfully slapped Alistair's arm. Olivia felt a prickle of unease. It was probably nothing. A business meeting. But here, why hadn't he just told her he was with a colleague? She took a half step back, nestling herself into the relative cover of the fake plant. Curiosity, cold and sharp, overrode her initial instinct to walk over. She needed to understand what she was seeing. The acoustics of the high-ceilinged room were surprisingly clear. And then she actually asked if the paint in the nursery was non-toxic. Scarlett said, her voice dripping with mockery. She took a delicate sip of her espresso, as if a little lead would be the worst thing for it. Alistair chuckled again, that same booming laugh that now sounded grating and cruel to Olivia's ears. You have to understand Scarlett. She thinks of everything in terms of risks. High-risk pregnancy, high-risk investments, it's exhausting. It's like living with an insurance adjuster. The bottle of water Olivia had been about to buy was forgotten. Her blood ran cold. He was talking about her. They were laughing about her. Scarlett leaned in further, her red hair brushing his shoulder. "Well, I hope for your sake the little heir doesn't come out with her anxiety. Can you imagine a Sterling who's afraid to take a risk? There's a contingency plan for that." Alistair said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial murmur, but Olivia heard every single word. "A trust fund, a good boarding school, and a therapist on retainer. It's the Sterling way of dealing with disappointments." Disappointments. The word echoed in the sudden silence of Olivia's mind. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a dismissal. Her, their son, their entire life together, reduced to a potential disappointment, to be managed and outsourced. The 9 months of careful dieting, the endless doctor's appointments, the fear and the hope she carried every single day, it was all a joke to him. A punchline he was sharing with his mistress over coffee. Scarlett's perfectly manicured hand found Alistair's on the table. And what about her? What's the contingency plan for the insurance adjuster? Alistair's smile was a predatory slash. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. "Olivia is comfortable. She enjoys the life I provide. She won't ever risk that. She's too practical, too boring." He squeezed Scarlett's hand. "Unlike you, you're an asset. She, my darling, has become a liability." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Olivia's feet. Liability. Disappointment. She backed away slowly, her movements stiff and robotic. She bumped into a cart of trays, the rattle barely registering. Neither Alistair nor Scarlett looked up. They were in their own world, a bubble of shared cruelty and contempt. She stumbled back to her table, her heart hammering against her ribs with a force that felt dangerous. The baby kicked a sharp, sudden jab, as if he too could feel the poison that had just entered their lives. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking so violently she could barely close the clasp. She had to get out. She walked one foot in front of the other, focusing on the exit sign at the far end of the cafeteria. It glowed a lurid red, a beacon in the haze of her shock. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she saw his face again, she knew she would either shatter into a million pieces or do something she would regret. Out in the cool afternoon air, she leaned against the brick wall of the hospital, gasping for breath. The city noise, the traffic, the sirens, the chatter of people passing by was a deafening roar. Dr. Albright's words came back to her. "Keep your stress levels down." A single, tearless sob escaped her lips. It wasn't a sob of sadness. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had insulted her intelligence. He had mocked their unborn child. He thought she was a liability. He thought she was boring and practical. He had no idea how practical she could be. He had no idea the risks she was willing to take when something she loved was threatened. He had built an empire on calculated risks. Now she would become the one variable he had never, ever planned for. The picture he had so carefully painted was about to be ripped to shreds. And she would be the one holding the blade. The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt like an ascent into a foreign country. The polished brass, the mirrored walls reflecting her pale, drawn face, the soft chime announcing their arrival at the top floor. It all felt like a set from a play she no longer had a part in. The key turning in the lock was unnaturally loud in the silence. She walked into the sprawling apartment, a monument to Alistair's success and her own design aesthetic. She had chosen every piece of furniture selected, every shade of paint, curated every piece of art. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a home. Now it felt like a gilded cage, each beautiful object a reminder of the lie she had been living. Her gaze fell on a framed photo on the console table, the two of them in Santorini Alistair's arm around her, both of them beaming at the camera. She had believed in that smile. She had built her life around it. An hour later, Alistair came home. He walked in whistling a bouquet of Olivia's favourite lilies in his hand. The hypocrisy was so staggering it almost made her laugh. "There you are," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm so sorry, darling. I got held up in the most dreadful last-minute meeting. I was worried when you didn't answer your phone." He moved to kiss her. Olivia turned her head, and his lips met her cheek. He paused, sensing the chill. "Everything all right? How was Dr. Albright?" "The doctor was fine," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. She looked at the lilies. "Who were you having coffee with, Alistair?" The question was so direct, so out of character for the non-confrontational woman he believed her to be, that it momentarily threw him. A flicker of something annoyance panic crossed his face before the mask of charming husband slipped back into place. "I told you a meeting," he said, setting the flowers down on the marble countertop, "with Robert Feldman about the new downtown tower. Terribly dry stuff. You would have been bored to tears. He was a phenomenal liar. Effortless. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was clear this was not his first performance. Robert Feldman." Olivia repeated her voice, still unnervingly calm. "That's strange, because from where I was sitting, Robert Feldman looked a lot like Scarlett Davenport, and she was wearing a red dress." Silence. The hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator was the only sound in the cavernous kitchen. Alistair's smile finally vanished. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, his posture shifting from relaxed to rigid. "Olivia, you're jumping to conclusions." He began his tone, shifting to one of patient condescension. "Scarlett is a bright young analyst. I'm mentoring her. Her father is an old acquaintance. It was a quick public meeting about quarterly projections. You're pregnant, your hormones are all over the place. You can't get worked up over nothing. Gaslighting. The classic first defense. He was trying to make her doubt her own reality. But she had the clarity of the newly brutally awakened. My hormones aren't making me hear things, Alistair. I heard you. I heard both of you." She took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. "I heard you call our son a potential disappointment. I heard you talk about contingency plans and boarding schools. I heard you call me a liability." Each word was a stone she threw at him, chipping away at his composure. The color drained from his face. He knew he was caught. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. His expression hardened into something she had never seen before, cold, dismissive, and utterly devoid of remorse. The charming millionaire was gone, and in his place was a ruthless stranger. "So you heard," he said, with a shrug, his voice laced with ice. "Fine. Let's stop the charade, then. Yes, I am seeing Scarlett, and yes, she offers a level of excitement and intellectual partnership that has been missing from this marriage for a very long time." The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. "A long time I'm carrying your child, Alistair. I have given up my career, my body, my entire life for the last year, to bring your son into this world safely. And you've been compensated handsomely for it, haven't you?" He sneered, gesturing around the opulent room. "Don't act the martyr, Olivia. This has always been a transaction. You wanted security of family. I wanted a beautiful stable hostess and an heir. You fulfilled your part of the bargain. Now you're becoming tedious. The constant worrying, the endless complaints. It's draining." The word transaction struck her harder than liability. He was recasting their entire relationship, their love story, as a business deal. It was a desperate, vicious attempt to absolve himself of guilt, to paint her as a gold digger who had simply reached the end of her contract. So what now, she asked, her voice trembling slightly for the first time, not with fear, but with a seismic rage that was building deep within her. Do you and Scarlett move in here after I'm gone? Do you tell our son his mother was just a tedious transaction? Alistair actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. Don't be so dramatic. Nothing has to change. You have your life, your comforts. I'll be more discreet. You'll have the baby, you'll be a wonderful mother, and you'll have all the financial support you could ever dream of. I will not have my reputation tarnished by a messy public divorce, especially not with the Sterling Tower project at a critical phase. You will stay here and you will play your part. It wasn't a request. It was an order. He was dictating the terms of her imprisonment. He truly believed her to be so weak, so dependent on his wealth, that she would accept this humiliating arrangement. He thought he held all the cards. That was his second mistake of the day. Olivia looked at the man she had once loved, the man she had promised to spend her life with, and felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. The love had been burned out of her in the hospital cafeteria. All that was left were ashes and resolve. No, she said the word quiet, but absolute. No. What do you mean? No, he scoffed. Where would you go? Back to your parents' little suburban house. Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. You're not built for that life anymore. You're right, she agreed, a strange, cold smile touching her lips. I'm not built for that life. I'm built for more. Without another word, she turned and walked towards the bedroom. He followed her, his voice rising in anger and disbelief. What are you doing, Olivia? Stop this foolishness. We can work this out. Think about the baby. Oh, I am, she said, pulling a pre-packed suitcase from the back of the walk-in closet, a just-in-case hospital bag that was about to serve a very different purpose. I am thinking only of him, and he will not be raised in a house with a man who considers him a potential disappointment. She packed only the essentials, her laptop, a folder of personal documents, toiletries, a few changes of comfortable clothes. She left the designer gowns, the expensive jewelry, the entire wardrobe of Mrs. Alistair Sterling, hanging in the closet like the shed skin of a life she was leaving behind. When she walked back into the living room, he was standing by the door, blocking her path. His face was a thunderous mask of fury. You are not leaving this apartment, he said through gritted teeth. I forbid it. Olivia looked him straight in the eye, her gaze unwavering. You don't get to forbid me from doing anything ever again. You think my world revolves around your money. You think that because I was designing homes instead of corporate towers, I'm not as smart, not as capable as you. You think I'm just a pretty accessory you acquired. She took a deep breath. You made a transaction, Alistair. You just miscalculated the value of the asset you were trying to liquidate. Now get out of my way. There was a new authority in her voice he had never heard. It wasn't hysterical or emotional. It was the calm, measured tone of a person who had absolutely nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing to fear. He saw it in her eyes, the fire, the intelligence he had once claimed to admire, now honed to a razor's edge and aimed directly at him. For a moment he seemed to consider physically stopping her, but something in her stance, in the sheer force of her will, made him hesitate. He slowly, reluctantly stepped aside. As she walked past him and out the door, she didn't look back. She didn't slam the door. She simply pulled it closed, the soft click echoing the final, irrevocable end of her old life. She was Olivia Hayes again, and her new project was not building a home, but tearing an empire down to its very foundations. The first 48 hours were a blur of logistics and adrenaline. Olivia didn't go to her parents. Alistair was right about one thing: he would look for her there, and she couldn't subject them to his brand of coercive charm or veiled threats. Instead, she checked into a nondescript extended-stay hotel in a quiet neighborhood she'd scouted for a client years ago. It was clean, anonymous, and offered free Wi-Fi. It was her new headquarters. Grief came in waves, sharp and unexpected. In the quiet of the night, the memory of his laugh in the cafeteria would surface, and she would have to physically hold herself together, breathing through the pain for the sake of the baby. But she didn't allow herself to wallow. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Anger was fuel, and she had a surplus. She spent the first day securing her independence. She had always maintained a separate bank account, a holdover from her freelance days that Alistair had mockingly called her Little Hobby Fund. It contained a modest but respectable sum enough to live on for months if she was careful. She called her bank, added new security protocols, and transferred the funds to a new account at a different institution. She bought a burn phone. She was cutting the digital ties that bound her to him. On the third day, she made the most important call of her new life. Benjamin Carter, please. Benjamin Carter was a name she'd filed away years ago. He was a partner at a boutique law firm, a quiet shark known for taking on complex, high-stakes corporate litigation. He was the polar opposite of Alistair's army of aggressive, loud corporate lawyers. Carter was known for his precision, his ethics, and his uncanny ability to find the single thread that could unravel an entire company. Olivia had met him once at a charity gala and had been impressed by his quiet intelligence. "This is Ben Carter." His voice was calm and steady. "Mr. Carter, my name is Olivia Hayes. We met briefly a few years ago at the Children's Literacy Gala. I'm in need of legal counsel regarding a sensitive domestic and financial situation." There was a brief pause. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his tone neutral, but acknowledging he knew exactly who she was. "I see. I have an opening at 4 p.m. today, if you're able to come to my office." His office was a testament to his personality. It was located in a beautifully restored historic building, filled with books, modern art, and clean lines. There was no opulent mahogany or intimidating decor. It was a space designed for thinking. Ben Carter was in his late 40s with kind eyes that belied a formidable intellect. He listened without interruption as Olivia laid out the entire story from the cafeteria to the final confrontation. She didn't cry. She presented the facts with the cool precision of an architect detailing a building's structural flaws. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "He said you were a liability," he mused. "In my experience, when arrogant men start assigning financial terms to human beings, it's because their own finances are not as stable as they appear. They project their own vulnerabilities onto others." A spark of hope ignited in Olivia's chest. "You think he's in trouble?" "Men like Alistair Sterling don't build empires that quickly without cutting corners or taking on massive, unsustainable debt," Carter explained. "His public image is his greatest asset. A messy divorce, as he noted, would be a problem. But a divorce that uncovers financial impropriety, that would be a catastrophe for him." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Olivia, I need to be clear. Divorcing a man with his resources will be a war. He will play dirty. He will try to paint you as unstable a gold digger. He will use your pregnancy, your pre-bed rest career, everything he can to discredit you." I know, Olivia said, her voice firm. "But he made a mistake. He told me I was tedious and practical. He's right about the practical part. For 7 years I've been his wife. I've balanced the household accounts, I've reviewed the investment portfolios with him. I've sat through endless dinners with his bankers and partners. I didn't just listen. I paid attention. He thought I was just nodding and smiling, but I was learning. This was her thesis, the foundation of her new plan. Alistair had seen her as decor, but she had been a silent apprentice. I remember things she continued, her mind racing, connecting dots that had once seemed random. Late-night calls he tried to hide, trips that were suddenly cancelled, names of shell corporations he mentioned once, and then never again. There was a project in South America, the Viridian deal, that went bust. He lost a fortune, but it never appeared on any official statements. He said he'd buried it. Carter's eyes lit up with a hunter's gleam. Burying a multi-million-dollar loss is not something one does legally. Olivia, this is exactly what we need. Specifics, names, dates, projects. He keeps a private ledger. She said, the memory surfacing with sudden clarity. Not on any company server. On a black, encrypted hard drive he keeps in the safe behind the Jericho print in his home office. He called it his legacy insurance. Carter's pen flew across his legal pad. Getting that would be the holy grail, but also nearly impossible without a court order which we can't get, without substantial proof to begin with. Maybe there's another way, Olivia murmured, thinking. As an architect, she knew blueprints. She knew systems, and she knew the security system of her own home because she had helped design it. She knew its blind spots, its access codes, the timing of the security patrols. I need you to file for divorce, Olivia said, her resolve hardening into steel. File it on the grounds of irreconcilable differences and infidelity. That will be the opening salvo. It will force his hand. He'll react, and when he does, he'll make a mistake. Arrogant men always do. And in the meantime, Carter asked, in the meantime, you start digging into the Viridian deal. Look for any regulatory filings, any partners who might be disgruntled. I'll make a list of every name, every project, every whispered conversation I can remember. She stood up, extending her hand. He called me a liability, Mr. Carter. I'm going to become the most expensive liability he's ever had on his books. As she shook his hand, Ben Carter saw not a scorned wife, but a brilliant strategist. He had a feeling this would be one of the most remarkable cases of his career. Leaving his office, Olivia felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer just a pregnant woman fleeing a broken marriage. She was an architect, and she was drawing up the blueprints for Alistair Sterling's demolition. The first step was to cause a tremor in his foundation. The divorce filing would be that tremor, and she knew with absolute certainty it was only the beginning. The divorce papers landed on Alistair Sterling's desk like a declaration of war. He had been in a board meeting charming investors with projections of staggering growth for the Sterling Tower. When his assistant handed him the legal summons, his public face of affable power barely flickered. But inside a volcano of rage erupted. His first call was to Olivia. It went directly to the voicemail of a disconnected number. His second was to her parents, who truthfully and fearfully told him they had no idea where she was. His third was to his lead attorney, a bulldog named Harrison Croft. "She's bluffing," Alistair snarled into the phone, pacing his office. "She has nothing. Find her. Freeze her accounts. I want her to come crawling back with nothing but the clothes on her back. The joint accounts are frozen," Croft reported grimly. "But she has a private account we can't touch without a court order. She's smarter than you gave her credit for, Alistair. And this lawyer she's hired, Benjamin Carter. He's not an ambulance chaser. He's meticulous. He doesn't take cases he can't win." The news only fueled Alistair's fury. He had underestimated her. It was a galling, infuriating realization. He found a strange sort of comfort with Scarlett. She was his echo chamber, validating his anger, stroking his ego. She's ungrateful, Scarlett murmured that evening, tracing the rim of her wine glass, as they sat in a private booth at an exclusive restaurant. After everything you've given her. Some people just don't appreciate fine things. It's the timing that's killing me, Alistair confessed, loosening his tie. The tower financing is at a knife's edge. We need one more major investor to close the final round. Any hint of public scandal, and they could get spooked. Then we fight back, Scarlett said, her eyes gleaming. You said it yourself, she's an emotional, hormonal pregnant woman. We can use that. We can leak stories. That she's unstable. That her departure was erratic. We create a narrative that makes her look like the villain. Alistair looked at her, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. You really are ruthless, aren't you? I learned from the best, she purred, leaning in to kiss him. But even as he embraced her, a seed of paranoia had been planted. Olivia wasn't acting like the timid woman he knew. She was acting like someone with a plan. Someone who knew something. The thought of the black hard drive in his safe gnawed at him. It was his greatest secret and his ultimate vulnerability. Meanwhile, in her quiet hotel room, Olivia was transforming into a forensic accountant of her own past. With Ben Carter's guidance, she created a vast mind map on her wall, using colored index cards and string. It was a web of names, dates, and connections. The Viridian deal was at the center. Okay, Viridian, she said over the phone to Ben staring at the wall. The partner he mentioned was a man named Michael Corrigan. Alistair said Corrigan was old school and got cold feet, pulling out at the last minute and collapsing the deal. Alistair claimed Corrigan's company went bankrupt shortly after. I'm looking into it, Ben said, his voice crackling with excitement on the other end. Corrigan Holdings did declare bankruptcy 8 years ago. But the interesting part is what I found in the court filings. Corrigan sued a series of unnamed entities for corporate sabotage just before he went under. He claimed they'd deliberately fed him bad geological data to scare him off the investment, only to try and scoop up the land rights themselves. The case was dismissed for lack of evidence. Corporate sabotage. That sounds exactly like something Alistair would do, Olivia whispered. Can you find this Michael Corrigan? He fell off the map after the bankruptcy, Ben said. Lost everything. Last known address was a rental in a different state. It'll take some time. While Ben hunted for the ghost of Michael Corrigan, Olivia focused on a different angle, Scarlett Davenport. There was something about her that didn't sit right beyond the obvious. Alistair had said her father was an old acquaintance. It was a vague, dismissive term. Using her old architectural firm's research database access, Olivia started digging. Scarlett Davenport, summa cum laude, Wharton School of Business, an impeccable resume. But her digital footprint before college was curiously thin. Olivia went deeper, cross-referencing names and locations. She searched for Davenport in connection with Alistair's past business dealings. Nothing. Then she had an idea. She stopped searching for Davenport and started searching for Scarlett's face. She ran her corporate headshot through advanced facial recognition software, a tool her firm sometimes used to verify the identities of international clients. She cross-referenced the results with public records yearbooks and old news articles. For days, she found nothing but dead ends. She was about to give up when a single grainy image popped up. It was a local news photo from 8 years ago, accompanying an article about the Corrigan Holdings bankruptcy. The photo showed a devastated-looking Michael Corrigan leaving a courthouse. Standing beside him, her arm linked through his, was a teenage girl with fiery red hair and a look of fierce, protective anger on her face. Her features were younger, rounder, but there was no mistaking those eyes. The caption beneath the photo read, Michael Corrigan with his daughter Catherine. Olivia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Catherine Corrigan, Scarlett Davenport. They were the same person. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a long con. Scarlett wasn't just a mistress Alistair had picked up. She was the daughter of the man he had ruined. Her entire presence in his life, her ambition, her praise, her seduction was a calculated act of revenge. She wasn't trying to build a future with Alistair. She was systematically positioning herself to destroy him from the inside. This changed everything. Olivia wasn't just fighting her husband anymore. She was caught in the crossfire of a decade-long vendetta. Scarlett wasn't her rival. She was a volatile and unpredictable player in a game far more dangerous than Olivia had ever imagined. She immediately called Ben. "Forget Michael Corrigan," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "I know who Scarlett Davenport really is, and our entire strategy has to change." At the same time, across the city, Alistair was growing more erratic. The pressure of the divorce filing and the financing deal was making him sloppy. He started drinking more. He became short-tempered with his staff, and he made a critical error. Feeling the walls closing in, he decided he needed to move his encrypted hard drive. He couldn't risk Olivia mentioning it in a deposition, however unlikely he thought that was. Late one night, he disarmed the security system, opened the safe, and slipped the black hard drive into his briefcase. He planned to move it to a private vault at his bank the next morning. He didn't know that Olivia, anticipating his paranoia, had paid a former security consultant from her firm to monitor the penthouse's system logs remotely. An alert pinged on her laptop. System deactivated master code. Safe sensor opened. System reactivated. He had taken the bait. The hard drive was out of the safe. It was mobile. It was vulnerable. Olivia now had 2 ticking time bombs on her hands, the hard drive containing proof of Alistair's crimes, and the woman sleeping in his bed, who was patiently waiting for the perfect moment to detonate her own life's work of vengeance. The question was, which one would go off first? The revelation about Scarlett, or rather Catherine Corrigan, forced Olivia and Ben to recalibrate their entire strategy. They were no longer simply exposing a cheating husband's financial misdeeds. They were walking into a meticulously planned revenge plot, and an unpredictable one at that. "She's a predator who has been stalking him for years," Ben said, during an urgent meeting in his office. "Her goal is the same as ours, his ruin, but her methods are unknown. She could be planning to leak everything to the press, sabotage the Sterling Tower deal from the inside, or something far more personal and destructive. We can't control her, which means we have to move faster," Olivia insisted. "Alistair has the hard drive. He's paranoid. He could decide to wipe it or destroy it at any moment. Scarlett's actions might push him to do just that. We have to get to it before either of them makes a move." Their plan was audacious and hinged on Alistair's arrogance. Ben filed an emergency motion for a deposition, citing Alistair's attempts to hide assets and Olivia's fear for her financial security. As part of the motion, they requested a temporary restraining order that would prevent him from accessing or moving funds from a specific list of accounts and safe deposit boxes, a list Olivia had painstakingly compiled. Crucially, they included the safe deposit box at the bank, where she guessed he would hide the drive. "He'll see the list of accounts and focus on that," Olivia reasoned. "He'll think we're just fishing for money. The safe deposit box will seem like one item among many. He won't realize it's the primary target." The judge granted the TRO scheduling the deposition for the following week. It was a small victory, but it set a timer. They now had a legal basis to intercept the hard drive, but the execution had to be flawless. Meanwhile, Alistair was feeling the pressure from all sides. The TRO was an infuriating nuisance, tying up his liquidity at the worst possible moment. His investors were getting nervous whispers about his domestic troubles. He was becoming increasingly dependent on Scarlett's reassurances. What he didn't know was that Scarlett was also feeling the pressure. Olivia's legal maneuvers were accelerating the timeline. Scarlett had planned a slower, more torturous demolition of Alistair's life, timed to coincide with the public launch of the Stirling Tower. She wanted to humiliate him at the peak of his triumph. But now this unknown lawyer and the surprisingly resilient wife were forcing her hand. She had to act. Her moment came on a rainy Tuesday night, 2 days before the scheduled deposition. Alistair came home to the penthouse drenched and furious. A key investor had officially pulled out, citing the instability surrounding his divorce. "It's her," he roared, throwing his briefcase onto the sofa. The black hard drive was still inside. He hadn't been able to move it to the vault because of the TRO. "Olivia is poisoning the well she's trying to ruin me." Scarlett came to him, her expression a perfect mask of sympathy. She poured him a large scotch, her movements graceful and calm. "It's all right, my love," she soothed. "We'll fix this. You're Alistair Stirling. You're invincible." "I'm not invincible if I have no capital," he spat, downing half the scotch in one gulp. "This tower was my legacy, and she's taking a sledgehammer to it." Scarlett saw her opening. The time for subtlety was over. It was time to reveal her hand and take control of the demolition herself. "Maybe a sledgehammer is what it needs," she said softly. Alistair looked up, confused. "What are you talking about?" Scarlett's sympathetic smile slowly morphed into something cold and unfamiliar. "I'm talking about legacy, Alistair. It's a powerful thing, isn't it? The desire to build something that lasts." "My father had that desire once." Alistair frowned. "Your father, the accountant. What does he have to do with this? He wasn't an accountant." Scarlett said, her voice dropping, losing its soft, purring quality and gaining a hard, flinty edge. "He was an entrepreneur, a risk-taker, just like you. His name was Michael Corrigan." The name hung in the air between them. Alistair froze the glass halfway to his lips. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The red hair, the fierce eyes. He saw the ghost of the man he had destroyed, reflected in the face of the woman he had brought into his bed. "Corrigan," he whispered, the blood draining from his face. "Yes," she said, her voice dripping with years of suppressed hatred. "You remember him. The man you bankrupted with fake geological surveys for the Viridian deal. The man whose reputation you shredded, whose life you turned to rubble. You didn't just take his company, Alistair. You took his spirit. He died 3 years later of a heart attack, a broken man who couldn't even look his own daughter in the eye." Alistair was speechless, his mind reeling. You're his daughter, Catherine. I prefer Scarlett." "Now," she said, with a chilling smile. "It has a certain flair, don't you think? For 8 years I have worked, I have studied, I have moulded myself into everything you desire, just for this moment. Just for the chance to stand here and watch the light go out in your eyes as you realize you invited the executioner into your own home." She reached into his briefcase, her movements now sharp and businesslike, and pulled out the black hard drive. She held it up. "And you made it so easy," she taunted, "giving me your trust, your secrets, everything I need to finish what you started, to utterly and completely annihilate you." Alistair lunged for it, a primal roar of fury and desperation erupting from his chest. But Scarlett was ready. She sidestepped him, and as he stumbled, she smashed a heavy crystal decanter over the back of his head. He crumpled to the floor, stunned and bleeding, but not unconscious. Just as Scarlett raised the decanter to strike again, the apartment door burst open. 2 uniformed officers, followed by a grim-faced Ben Carter, stormed into the room. "Drop it, police," one of them shouted. Ben had been playing a hunch. Fearing Scarlett's volatility, he had convinced a judge to move up the order to retrieve Alistair's personal effects, including the briefcase, arguing he was a flight risk. He had timed their arrival perfectly. They had walked into the chaotic climax of Scarlett's revenge. Scarlett froze the decanter in her hand, Alistair groaning on the floor, the precious hard drive lying between them. Her plan had been derailed in the final critical moment. Police swarmed the room, securing a dazed Alistair and a spitting, furious Scarlett. In the ensuing chaos, Ben Carter calmly walked over, picked up the black hard drive from the floor, and placed it into an evidence bag. He looked from the bleeding millionaire to his vengeful mistress. Well, Ben muttered to himself, that's one way to conduct discovery. He had the evidence. But the storm had converged in a way no one could have predicted, leaving a wreckage of violence and shattered plots. And listening to Ben's frantic update over the phone from her quiet hotel room, Olivia knew that while her victory was now assured, the fallout was going to be immense. The implosion of Alistair Sterling's life was not a quiet affair. It was a public spectacle, a supernova of scandal that consumed the city's news cycle for months. Headlines screamed from tabloids and broadsheets alike. Sterling empire crumbles amidst sex and sabotage. The mistress, the wife, and the million-dollar vengeance plot tycoon's penthouse of lies. The media narrative painted Alistair as a modern-day Icarus, a man of immense ego and ambition, who had flown too close to the sun, brought down not by a single misstep, but by the gravitational pull of all his sins at once. Paparazzi photos showed him, haggard and grim-faced, a stark shadow of the charismatic titan he once was, his tailored suits looking hollow on his shrinking frame as he trudged in and out of courthouses. Catherine Corrigan forever immortalized, as Scarlett became a different kind of sensation. Her story was a complex tapestry of tragedy and malice. The media portrayed her as both a femme fatale and a victim of generational trauma, a daughter whose grief had curdled into a cold, calculated rage. Her defense team masterfully played on this public sympathy, arguing that her actions were the foreseeable result of a psyche shattered by Alistair's destruction of her family. She ultimately accepted a plea deal for the assault charges, 3 years of probation and court-ordered counseling, a legal slap on the wrist that felt to many like a tacit acknowledgement of her suffering. Her war was over, but she was left adrift, a ghost in her own story. Throughout this maelstrom, Olivia Hayes remained a phantom. She was the story's silent, enigmatic center. Tabloid journalists and primetime television producers launched a frantic hunt for the wronged wife, offering 6-figure sums for an exclusive interview. They wanted tears, anger, a tell-all confession. They wanted to cast her in a role, the grieving victim or the triumphant victor. Olivia refused them all. From the quiet sanctuary of her new modest apartment, which Ben Carter had helped her secure under an assumed name, she watched the storm from a distance. "They want a circus." Olivia. Ben had told her, sitting in her small living room, a stack of rejected media offers on the coffee table. "Don't let them make you the main attraction." "I have no interest in their circus," she had replied, her hand resting on her swelling belly. "I didn't do this for an audience. I did this for him." Her goal had never been public vindication, but private liberation. Justice for her was not about seeing Alistair humiliated on television. It was about ensuring her son would be born into a world free of his father's toxic legacy. The divorce was a footnote in the larger legal saga. Faced with decades in prison and financial ruin, Alistair's legal team advised him to settle quickly and quietly. He relinquished all claims to their shared assets without a fight. Olivia received a settlement that was substantial enough to guarantee a lifetime of security for her and Mason, but she took far less than she could have demanded. She didn't want his money tainted, as it was by deceit. She wanted a clean slate, a severing of the final tie. 3 months after the penthouse confrontation, in the sterile, quiet peace of a private hospital room, Olivia gave birth to a perfect, healthy baby boy. She named him Mason Hayes. As she held him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapping around hers, the last vestiges of the old world fell away. The anger, the betrayal, the fear, it all dissolved in the overwhelming, fierce love she felt for this new life. This was her true north, the foundation upon which everything else would be built. Ben Carter was her emergency contact, the one who brought her home from the hospital, his steady friendship, a quiet anchor in her new reality. With Mason as her motivation, Olivia began to design her future. She sold a single piece of jewelry from her old life, a gaudy diamond tennis bracelet Alistair had given her, after closing a particularly ruthless deal. It fetched a small fortune, which became the seed money for her vision. She didn't buy a sprawling house or indulge in luxury. Instead, she incorporated the Hayes Design Group. Her firm's mission was radical in its simplicity. She wouldn't be designing glass towers for the wealthy or minimalist penthouses for the elite. She would focus on creating beautiful, dignified, and sustainable community-focused architecture. Her first proposal, which she personally presented to a skeptical city planning committee, was to transform a derelict waterfront warehouse into a mixed-use residential building. It would feature affordable family-sized apartments, green roof spaces, and a subsidized daycare center on the ground floor. She spoke with a passion and precision that captivated the committee, her blueprints illustrating not just a building, but a thriving, supportive ecosystem. They approved the project unanimously. A year after her world had been torn apart, Olivia stood on the bustling construction site. The skeleton of the warehouse was now filled with the promise of a new beginning. The air, once stagnant and decaying, now rang with the rhythmic clang of hammers and the buzz of power saws, a symphony of creation. Mason, now a babbling toddler, sat in his stroller, pointing with delight at a passing forklift. Ben Carter approached, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and a bag of pastries. He had become a fixture in their lives, a beloved Uncle Ben to Mason and Olivia's most trusted confidant. "Look at you, Hayes," he said, smiling as he handed her a coffee. "Building your own empire." "It's not an empire," Olivia corrected him gently, a peaceful smile gracing her lips. "It's a community. Empires are built on power and ego. This is being built with purpose." She looked at the structure rising before them, its clean lines and wide windows designed to let in the light. She then looked down at her son, whose laughter was the brightest thing in her world. She had once been the wife of a man who built monuments to himself. Now she was building a legacy of a different kind, one measured not in square footage or profit margins, but in the quality of the lives it would shelter. Alistair had called her a liability, a practical, boring woman who was afraid of risks. He was right about her being practical, but he had fundamentally misunderstood her. She wasn't afraid of risks. She was simply selective about them. And she had taken the biggest risk of all, betting on herself. And it was a wager she had won more completely than he could ever have imagined. Olivia's story isn't just about the downfall of a powerful man. It's a powerful testament to resilience. It shows us that true strength isn't about the absence of pain, but about what we choose to build from the rubble. She transformed from a victim of betrayal into the architect of her own justice, and more importantly, her own happiness. Her greatest victory wasn't destroying Alistair's empire, but creating a new world for herself and her son built on integrity and purpose. What did you think of Olivia's quiet, calculated path to justice? Was Scarlett's fiery revenge justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.